There's people we now know that no longer are in remission from cancer. They're officially labeled as cured from cancer. How do we get more of those people in this world, and what can we do for it? And how do we really drive digital into an industry that is hungry for it, but has some challenges about understanding how it fits?
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, the podcast highlighting how digital shows up in real life. I'm your host, Rissa Redden, Chief Marketing Officer at West Monroe. In this podcast, we break down the latest digital trends and show you how the concept of being digital shows up in the news, in success stories, and within your own organization. I'm thrilled to be joined on today's episode by Kevin Gordon, Chief Digital Officer at Ori Biotech, a leading company in cell and gene therapy manufacturing technology. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Reza.
Kevin, could you give us a little bit of your background? What attracted you to life sciences?
What really got me into it was it seemed to be one of the places remaining in the United States where full research, development, manufacturing, distribution of any product continued to exist. I always sort of used to joke with people when they thought of pharma as big and evil. My challenge back used to be, other than guns, planes, and drugs, what do we research, develop, and manufacture in the United States? That was sort of a long-time piece of thinking of working in IT in the life sciences industry, which wasn't always the greatest of places. But then when you got into this new branch of curative therapies that really changed the landscape of we're not going to put people on pills for forever, the fun of that really became that the data and IT side of pulling those pieces together became much more value add to the industry than the previous side of the world, which felt more like a sunk cost.
So is it fair to say then that the evolution of life sciences to be focused on cell and gene therapy is what is appealing or exciting to you?
It is. Really, modern medicine in at least drug delivery sort of went through a revolution with small molecules, then a revolution with antibodies, and now we're in the beginning of the revolution of both cell therapies as well as gene therapies as curative treatments.
And for those who may not be as familiar, could you give us a brief primer on what cell therapy is or what gene therapy is?
Sure thing. And, full disclaimer, not a doctor. In hopefully the simplest of terms, gene therapy is literally going into the human genome and editing one piece of it to hopefully correct an issue. And probably the best known one is Ork's product, which goes in and fixes a genetic anomaly that eventually would turn into blindness as somebody ages. In cell therapy, most of the time what people are doing is taking white blood cells, genetically reprogramming them to recognize something that on their own they would not see in the body. Right. And in the easiest of examples, cancer is very good at hiding from the human immune system. And a lot of what cell therapy is doing is reprogramming white blood cells to now being able to identify those tumors and actually just remove them the way they would any other foreign object would be in the body. And so we take out white blood cells from people, we genetically reprogram them, we grow them to very large volume, we put them back into people with the expected outcome of being curative in a number of different therapies.
And curative, you've mentioned a couple of times so far in our conversation, is a really big deal, meaning it's different than treating or managing. It's really the end of the condition. Is that right?
It is. And it's why it's so exciting to be a part of is instead of the concept of putting somebody onto a therapy they'll take for the rest of their life, really the opportunity to go through either a round or multiple rounds of therapy that the output of them is you no longer have the disease.
On an earlier episode of This is Digital, we were chatting with Rob Wescott, who is an economist, and he said fairly definitively that we will see the end of cancer in the next few years. I mean, that was fairly bold to me, but I'm curious to get your perspective on that. Will we see an end to cancer? Will it be certain cancers? What are your predictions for the future?
I think that an end to all cancer is an interesting attempt. And I think eventually science, medicine will get there. I think what we've already started to see is that blood cancers, we've gotten very good at understanding how to treat solid tumors. So lung cancer, ovarian, those types of things. The tumor environment's much more difficult to infiltrate and remove. So those are coming along. And ultimately, all of them have their own tricks to being able to work with them. So I do think that very soon we're going to be at a place where the science is prepared to deal with a very wide range of cancers. The real question starts to become is how early can we provide those therapies to patients? So how much standard course of care do they need to go through before these curative therapies are available to them?
Tell us about Emily Whitehead.
Sure thing. So Emily Whitehead was the second person ever to receive what they call CAR T therapy. So the reprogramming of her white blood cells to go deal with a form of leukemia. So Emily was a terribly sick, very little girl, and really was told by her parents, by the doctors that were treating her, to go home, put her in hospice, make her comfortable. There was nothing left to be done for her. And a number of researchers at University of Pennsylvania who had been looking into these CAR T therapies, so immuno-oncology, a way of reprogramming cells to go fight cancer, were part of Penn, and they were introduced to Emily, and they took a chance and gave Emily one of the first ever manufactured CAR T therapies. And actually, after getting far more sick, she amazingly one day came out of a storm and was a healthy, happy little girl. And amazingly, as she's passed her 10-year mark of being cancer-free, she is no longer considered in remission from cancer. She is considered cured of cancer. So she's one of the first two people ever to officially no longer be in remission, but officially be considered cured of cancer, which is a pretty amazing thing when you really start to think about there's that few people who can ever say they've made it to the other side of that.
And Kevin, as you think about scale, you have written extensively on paper being the enemy of scale. Could you elaborate a little bit on that idea and what that means in the life sciences context?
But a lot of times in this industry, a paper record of what's going on with that is following that all the way up to production. And what we've sort of said is the way that all other industries have really adopted digital technologies, paperless records, better feedback loops, better understanding of data analytics. The same thing needs to be applied to the cell and gene industry to really give it the opportunity to scale, to do things like learn and have feedback to what's going well versus what's not in process, to really better, in the simplest terms, to have better outcomes for patients that are going through these treatments.
As Chief Digital Officer, what challenges keep you up at night? What is worrisome to you as you think about doing more, doing better for the business?
It's a fun set of challenges that we always talk about, which is a lot of the equipment that manufactures these products is been repurposed from some other form of therapy development. And as a result, it's not necessarily modern. And the way a lot of these, what they call the cores of these cell manufacturing processes, right? These are airlocked, highly controlled, high grade base areas. What a lot of people will do is air gap them from the internet, because there's compute in them that doesn't have new antivirus. There's concern of ransomware getting into those spaces and shutting everything down. So to the keeps me up at night is I've always had the hypothesis that there's no reason to not let digitally native compute and equipment into the heart of these spaces. But we know there's a resistance and a barrier to doing that necessarily because it's new to a lot of the people. And new means new sets of controls from regulatory and quality. It's a giant step for a lot of the people who have been doing this for a long time. And in cell therapy, that's not that long. It's 20 years, but they have 20 years of a way they're comfortable of doing it. And we're now potentially asking them to add something new, a bit foreign to them, and into their really sanctum core of going, let's let something that's a bit more intelligent live in here because the benefits of it greatly outweigh any of the challenges or any of the risks.
And Kevin, as you think about innovation and driving innovation, are there some real world examples you could share with us?
Amazingly, COVID was a very good example of how rapidly a lot of that development was able to be done. So if you think about mRNA vaccines as a new type of vaccine technology that had never been used before, and really how quickly it came to market. The companies that manufactured those were also people that are very much on this digital journey. And part of the reason they were able to give the regulators and get the indications to use these therapies and really get these to market as quickly as they did is because they had more data natively in their processes to start. The other side of that is back to that we can release it without a bunch of human second checks because it's data. So that's a big leap ahead. The other ones that have been shown are really probably the vaccine development that happened as quickly as it did in the COVID pandemic, endemic, as we are still going through it. Really, those are probably the two best recent examples.
And with digital, is there an opportunity to create greater patient access?
There absolutely is, just in cost alone. If we can lower the cost of these therapies from, and probably the simplest example is you think about leukemia and bone marrow transplants. Leukemia and bone marrow transplants for a very long time has been a known way to have better outcomes for patients as a therapy for them. If we could get a cell therapy product to cost the same as bone marrow transplant and really make it available to clinicians and doctors and oncologists in the market to go, instead of going through all the pain of bone marrow, maybe we can go directly to a more curative cell therapy. All of that really comes down to going, if you take a base figure of a CAR T therapy's $400,000 as a cost to at least the US healthcare system, bone marrow transplants about 100. Can we reduce the cost of these therapies down by that much? Can we get it to 25% of current? And if we do, that really opens up a whole new world of access to patients. And more importantly, it potentially moves the opportunity to provide these therapies to earlier stages in the process. So one of the really hard parts of working in this industry is knowing there's truly curative therapies available to people who are having really terrible health outcomes of being enormously sick from them, and they can't get access to them, right? Like, we constantly try to find the real numbers of data to go, of 100 million people in the world with a certain type of cancer or a broad range of cancer, what percentage of them have had a cell therapy treatment? And it's fractions of a percent based on what we're seeing. Broader access also gives us the option of going, instead of surgical interventions and deeper sets of chemotherapy, can we move these earlier in the process and give somebody who's earlier in life has a longer, healthier set of outcomes to have an opportunity to just be cured and then really live a healthier, happier life without having to go through ongoing sets of really difficult treatments of going, our way to solve this is we're going to kill all of the soft tissue in your body in hopes that when it comes back, the cancer will no longer be there.
Kevin, I would love for you to look into your crystal ball and tell us, what will life sciences look like in 3 to 5 years? And then similarly, what is Ori Biotech doing in 3 to 5 years?
Absolutely. So life sciences, I believe that the better understanding of personalized medicines will really continue to evolve, because if you really think about standard course of care for patients, the person's conditions leading up to that moment, their ethnicity, their sex, their age. There's some changes that go on in their course of therapy. What I think will continue to evolve is more targeted sets of therapies based on pre-existing conditions and other environmental factors for those people. I think cell therapy and gene therapy will continue to evolve and be very proven to have the opportunity to be curative to these. Really, what is unclear is when you hear about cell therapy, you hear a lot about CAR-Ts, which is that rogue program of white blood cells. And in those cases, they're starting with the patient's own starting material. What we at Ori believe is if we can scale that, make it cost effective, and make it faster, we can open this up to a lot more people, and we know these treatments are effective. The question is going to be is, are there other newer cell and gene techs that continue to come into market to also solve this and make it faster and easier to do? So to where Ori is in 5 years, what we're really seeing is the opportunity to have a network of equipment, better understanding how cell growth happens for these patients.
Well, I find it fascinating, the idea of supply chain, and that typically you as a person are at the end of that supply chain, but in this set of circumstances, you are the beginning and you are the end. And that idea of personalization and being hyper specific to the individual is fascinating. I did want to, as we wrap up here, ask you a question that we'd like to ask all of our guests, and that is, what does being digital mean to you?
It's interesting in a world of internet, social media, constantly connected to everything, that sort of digital appears ubiquitous in a lot of our lives today. What digital starts to mean for me personally, given the field in which I work and sort of the history of seeing the pharmaceutical life sciences industry evolve over time, is really to use digital and the data that's coming from it as the ability to be smarter about decisions that are being made, have better learnings based on failures that have happened previously, and cleaner models of path to success ultimately all this comes down to is there's people we now know that no longer are in remission from cancer. They're officially labeled as cured from cancer. How do we get more of those people in this world, and what can we do for it? And how do we really drive digital into an industry that is hungry for it, but has some challenges about understanding how it fits? That to me is really what it could mean and hopefully means, and really starts to be the third revolution of therapy in medicine for people as we really move into this next generation.
Kevin, for those listening that would like to learn more about Ori Biotech, where should they go?
Sure. So our website is oribiotech.com. We also are very active on LinkedIn. We're always happy to interact and answer questions.
And Kevin, you write, you have written a paper on paper being the enemy of scale. For your thought leadership and to follow what you're up to, where should people find you? Really,
the Ori Biotech LinkedIn page is probably the best place to find most of what comes out on my side.
Thank you so much, Kevin. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.